Hello Year 10, and thanks for well done for finding this video link. One of the tasks that I've set you in the lesson is to complete a question, which is a 12-marker question on the topic you just had a look at, which is divorce is never right. However, all I've asked you to do is to do a SOJ. Now, a reminder that means a supporting view, an opposing view, and your judgment or your conclusion. Now, I would love it if you tried to do a full SOJ, but if you, at a minimum, I want you to do this question as fully as you can, but with just a SOJ, which would be worth 7 marks at a maximum. So I want you to give this a go. But if you have no idea how to do it, or indeed you would like a reminder, I thought I would make this video to give you some guidance. And I've written a potential answer for you, and this is one way that you could go about writing this question. So I'm going to go through. You can look at my face, or you can look at the PEEs on the other side of the video screen, but I'm going to talk through it, and I'm going to talk through how and why I've chosen what I've chosen, and what that means in terms of what you could write. Okay, because there's loads and loads of religious and non-religious teachings, stats, facts, lots of stuff you could include for this question. Divorce is never right. Remember, you are going some, and then on the other hand, and then the conclusion ends with overall the strongest view in my opinion is. So what does this look like? Well, hopefully I've color coded it, so let's have a look. So the question, divorce is never right. The full SOJ 12 marker in terms of the exam timings you will get around 15 minutes for. So this should take you, let's say, 8 minutes. That's sort of the timings I want you to stick to. If you write for longer than that, a good idea is to time yourself, and when you hit 8 minutes or 15 minutes if you're doing a full 12 marker, or if you've got extra time, add that 25% on. But when you reach that time, let's call it 8 minutes, stop, take a different colour pen and finish your answer, and then you know how much extra that you need to write, or you know how much over the timing you are, so you can keep practicing and trying to get close to that time. Okay, so divorce is never right. Let's have a look. So the first PEE, the S, the supporting view, which is in a PEE. Remember, I need to write 3 solid sentences for each PEE. So if I'm doing a SOJ, a support, oppose, and a judgment, that should be 3 sentences for the support, 3 sentences for the oppose, or you know, 2 long sentences including a quote, and then 2 or 3 sentences with some evidence for my opinion. Okay. One of the most difficult things to try and get used to is not repeating your point when you try to explain it. So I'm going to show you how you do that. So, divorce is never right. Some Christians who believe in the sanctity of holy marriage vows may argue that divorce is never right. Now, you will notice here I've said some Christians, and I've used the wording of the question. Both of these are really important to keep your structure tight. You need to start with a full sentence. So, some Christians who believe in the sanctity of holy marriage vows may argue that divorce is never right. Point. So your evidence. You could put this is because, if you want to stick to the wording, this is because this means that, but this is still evidence. This is because, or reasons for this may include the quote from Matthew 5:32. Now you don't need to remember the numbers. If you can, brilliant. Matthew is the book in the New Testament. If you can't remember that either, don't worry, just say Jesus said. Or if you can't remember, whatever you can remember, the more you can remember the better. If you just remember it's from the Bible, then say that. So, reasons for this may include the quotes from Matthew 5:32, which says that if a man divorces his wife for any cause other than unfaithfulness, he involves her in adultery. Explanation. You can't just leave it there. You need to then reapply it to the question. So, this means that although some Catholics may allow separation in certain circumstances, divorce and remarriage are not permitted. So you could also say divorce and remarriage are never right. So you're repeating the wording of the question. Now, if you're trying to do what we know is called a sausage max, which is to directly link the support and opposed points. That quote, if a man divorces his wife for any cause other than unfaithfulness, I've interpreted that here to mean that divorce is never right, although you can separate. You could then say this might not work because the quote says that other than unfaithfulness, which may suggest that a reason for divorcing is unfaithfulness. So you can give, and actually it's easier in some ways because you only need to remember one quote and talk about two different interpretations of the same quote. So that's another way to do it, but I haven't done that. So to review that PEE, I've put some Christians, I've given evidence, and I've then explained it with a this means that, and I've referred back to the wording of the question. Slap the examiner metaphorically round the face with the wording of the question to show that you know what you're talking about. The opposed point. On the other hand, use a connective like although or however or on the other hand, contrastingly, but make sure you do use that connective. Write it in a second paragraph as well. On the other hand, some people in the UK would argue that divorce can and should be allowed. Now, you absolutely need to talk about different religious perspectives, but it is okay if not every single point is religious. Okay? So the reason that I've given this example is to show that you can use an opposing point that has evidence that is not from a religious perspective. If you want to use some Christians, other Christians, or some Christians, some Buddhists, that's fine. But I've showed an example here where I'm not using a religion for the opposed point. So, on the other hand, some people in the UK would argue that divorce can and should be allowed. Point. What's my evidence or support for that? So let's see. This is because over the years, laws on divorce have developed to become more equal, and some would argue that divorce in the modern day is an example and expression of women's rights. Now, I haven't used a quote, but I have been quite specific with my wording on the laws on divorce may have developed to become more equal, and I've used the key term women's rights. Okay, so that's my evidence. How do I explain that? When I say explain it, how do I link it directly to the wording of the question? So, this means that in situations such as domestic abuse, divorce may be the best alternative for the safety and happiness of one or both parties rather than one person living in fear and violence. Now, it's implied here, but if you want to absolutely be sure, you could add, this means that divorce is never right, or therefore divorce is therefore divorce is sometimes right. Okay? So I've directly applied it back to the question. Point, evidence, explanation. Your conclusion should never be, in conclusion, divorce is right. Okay? No point in saying that. Ask yourself, how is this adding to my answer? Okay? So I've given a conclusion here, so let's have a look. Overall, the strongest view in my opinion, that should be. Overall, the strongest in my view. Bad wording. Overall, the strongest view in my opinion is. Okay, so always use a phrase like that. First person. Divorce is justifiable in some circumstances. Don't leave it there. That's a lovely point. Let's have some facts. 42% of marriages in the UK now end in divorce, and although most people would not see this as a positive statistic, divorce is often the best outcome in situations such as adultery, domestic abuse, or neglect. I think that's 2 sentences, but there's a lot of information in the second sentence. So let's review. This is a SOJ. This took me 8 minutes. Obviously, you're not the teacher, so you're going to need to practice, which is why I've given you this example. First, PEE, some, this is because, Christian quote, this means that. Opposing point, on the other hand, this is because, this means that. wording of the question in the this means that part, overall the strongest view in my opinion is. And that, ladies and gents, is what a support, oppose and judgment should look like. Now you give it a go. Thanks for listening.